Hello everyone. Is Jaxson Ryker the latest superstar to benefit from walking alone? The women's tag titles are framed as a passport, but to where? And despite his painful history with Money in the Bank, Drew's determined to become the bearer of that career-changing contract. I'm Casualeann. Come with me. Segment 1 begins with Kevin Patrick and R-Truth, the new former 24/7 champion. And I say new former because during the Battle Royal to determine Randy Orton's replacement, he regained the 24/7 championship over Akira Tozawa and then lost it very promptly once again. He conveys this to Kevin Patrick. He says he almost had it, but he was angry about Kevin Patrick not being there to help him. Apparently, there were some people who were also angry with Kevin Patrick. He says that he's received some tweets about how aggravated they were, and Truth asks him where he was. He says he was in catering, and Truth gives him like a 9-mile stare. So upset. And he asks him who his name is. And he answers Kevin Patrick, not the answer Truth is looking for. Then KPZ. And Truth answers and act like it. They discuss Riddle winning the Battle Royal in order to enter the triple threat on Randy Orton's behalf to try to win a spot for him in the Money in the Bank ladder match. And Truth was cheered by the love that he showed to Randy Orton. So him getting up on the turnbuckle and doing the Randy Orton pose and telling them to play his music, and then they brought the pyro with the shimmering waterfall of sparks. Kofi was in a war of words against MVP until he attacked him with his cane and got knocked out by a Trouble in Paradise for his trouble. The new almost superhero, Nikki Cross, defeated Shayna Baszler. I am tired of her getting denigrated like every single time we see her. She started as the super best Iron Woman. Then she became a superhero. Fine. Now she's just almost a superhero. Like, what's gonna happen next week on Raw? Is she gonna be pretty good, okay person, Nikki Cross? There's a bottom. Find it and stay there and then move up. She didn't defeat Shayna Baszler. Everyone does right now. They announced the guest segments. They are Tamina and Natalya, the women's tag team champions. Our new semi-co-host, Drew McIntyre, self-proclaimed, and Jaxson Ryker. Now, I was glad we got at least a little involvement with the 24/7 championship, even if it was briefly. That represents motion, and in the weeks before live fans return, that's about as much as you can hope for. After a brief commercial break, segment 2 begins with Jaxson Ryker. We're shown Jaxson, flatulating himself when Akira Tozawa ran through, and we follow Truth's conversation with him pre-match. Now, Truth says he knows how real that strap is by the sound it made against Jackson's flesh, and he calls it a latsui. Interestingly enough, Ryker lets Truth borrow it. Now, I'm wondering how, when, or if that's going to come into play down the line, but he does let him use it. Truth says that that's more than Kevin Patrick has done for him. Ryker begins confessing, kind of giving us a peek behind this curtain in he and Elias's relationship, the breakdown of that relationship specifically. He reveals that the way that Elias has gone about him, leaving him behind, talking about him being disturbed by Ryker or not wanting to go places with him, that's what made him go rogue. And Kevin Patrick asks, well, how are you now? And he responds, I'm actually good. Now, this is following his victory, so it makes perfect sense. They watch back the highlights from that strap match. Kevin Patrick pushes for a bit more. He wants to know, did he actually feel bad from doing that, from having to just whip Elias over and over and over again? Ryker answers, no, he deserved it. And R-Truth, by the severity and kind of ferocious nature of the feud now, asks, well, all of this from not being tagged? Leave it to R-Truth to like kind of reflect the questions that the fans themselves would ask, because it does seem a little bit weird when you think about it. All of this really did come from Ryker just being left behind at a tag match. Now granted, it was a tag team titles match, but that's really all that happened, is Elias left him behind, and that's the whole origin of the feud. Ryker says that he deserted him. Elias did. And you never do that. And you can tell he's pulling from some of his military training there. This brings up an interesting point. He points out maybe Elias was holding me back. We'll get into that in just a second. Kevin Patrick asks, what does Elias now represent to you? And Ryker describes him as a foe, a man he does not trust, but oddly enough that he still does respect him. Complex. With this, he has proven that Elias is the beginning of his ascent to the top, and that Elias deserting him showed him that he can stand alone. Finally, Kevin Patrick asks, well, what's next for you? And Ryker says, championship. This idea of Elias holding Jaxson Ryker back, him triumphing over him, that's an essential point to make for the progression of Jaxson Ryker as a character. Now, as far as the main roster is concerned, we know him as Elias's sidekick. So he needs to distance himself in a way that's different, or that's apart from Elias just ditching him. I thought he was great in this segment. He was focused yet intense, victorious but diligent, and still a soldier, but not in that unhinged way that Elias was trying to affix to him. Great stuff. Segment 3 is with Natalya and Tamina. I didn't really have a ton of notes for this one. I will give you what I do have. Apparently, R-Truth and Natalya have some sort of special handshake. And Kiki is now KPZ's nickname from Tamina. So they each have their own little thing with their respective hosts. They're asked what the relationship is with Mandy and Dana. They note that they're happy to see that they finally care about what's happening and that they stepped up. Now, Tamina and Truth continue to not get along here. It's been ongoing for a while, so good continuity on their part. Natalya reiterates the passport idea that they brought up when they first became champions, and we'll get into that in a second as well. But Tamina notes that everyone else now comes after them because they are the champions. But Natalya says that gold does cure everything, and everyone has been looking at them differently, and they all want what they have, essentially this target on the back idea that you hear champions often speak of. But they're not hiding. The tag team champions said that if anyone wants to step up, they can. They give some specific examples. Bailey, if she wants to tag with someone, they're free to. Nikki and Asuka, a few people from NXT are mentioned. Kevin Patrick asks, how has being the tag team women's champions changed them? Natalya says they now realize how strong they are, how they learned they no longer wish to be doormats. They proceed to go on their way, and Tamina kind of gives R-Truth a bit of a sneer. Yeah, nobody meaner than Tamina. R-Truth said she need counseling. So again, the tension does continue between R-Truth and Tamina. But let's revisit very quickly the passport idea. Now, when they first won, I was all about it. And in fact, I'll put a card up here as to what I thought in detail about the passport idea. The problem now is that weeks after they've become tag team champions, that idea has fallen flat, considering that nothing has changed. All they do now is feud with Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke. You barely even see them on SmackDown anymore. The past few weeks, you haven't seen them on SmackDown. They continue to defeat these same couple of people Shouldn't we see them on SmackDown sometimes? Which, despite Zelina Vega's return, is still woefully short of women. Shouldn't we get clips of them defending the titles on NXT? If it's a passport, that joker is clean and unstamped as it can be. Which is unfortunate because I was very excited about them becoming women's tag team champions. Just in general, this segment was kind of average to me. After a final commercial break, we get Drew McIntyre, who, via his victory in the triple threat on Raw, has now qualified for the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. Kevin Patrick asks, how did it happen? And he says that no matter what, he was going to win and head into Money in the Bank. But to be honest, he was still beat up from Hell in a Cell and the subsequent fight with Riddle last week. He brings up, and I had no idea that it was this many, that he has fought in 14 pay-per-views in a row. Now, I'm not sure how accurate that is, but if it's anywhere near that many, that's still incredibly impressive. He's been recommended by people to take time off, but he asserts that that's just not how he does things. He gives the usual statements about going to Money in the Bank and winning and becoming Mr. Money in the Bank. And he is asked about the importance of that contract. And he notes that it might be his last chance to get to the top of any brand and that he must win. This is an idea that's interesting as well that, again, we'll talk about in just a second. He cites that he has a love-hate relationship with Money in the Bank. Now, because Bobby Lashley helped The Miz to successfully cash in on Drew McIntyre, that's how he lost the belt initially. So it was kind of an easy way for Bobby to win when he did get it, without him having to directly defeat Drew while he was champion. Despite the fact that that is how he initially lost it, now it might provide him with the one path forward to actually get the title back if Bobby loses. He echoes the sentiment that you've heard over so much of the roster, which is he can't wait to be back in front of live fans. And he almost like something of a rock star, like this idea of the sixth member of our group is all of you, or the fourth member of our group is all of you. He says that the fans should be on the roster page, and he's really just excited about their return. He notes that he's been on the Raw Talk set like every couple of weeks. He pretty much hosts at this point. They talked about the Euro Cup for a minute or so. I know less than zero about it, so I will move on and not even attempt to try to mention what they were talking about. Drew asks, what's Kevin Patrick's prediction from Money in the Bank? Might be trying to ensnare him a bit after he predicted that Bobby would retain in Hell in a Cell. Kevin Patrick adroitly chooses Drew. Truth commends him on his choice, and then Drew heads on out. What does the drop of the phrase any brand mean? Especially with the context of Roman's comment in the Peter Rosenberg podcast about Drew being number 2, but not being on SmackDown. Does that mean that Drew could potentially slide over to the blue brand? We do know that a draft is coming before too long. I believe in August. If Drew is going to move to the blue brand, I don't mean any harm, but I hope that he leaves the weekly kind of Scottish history promo alone. It's way cooler to kind of call to Scottish history or call to Scottish heritage before a big match to evoke his identity even more than he already does. Reserving that for a big match is so much better. Doing it every week kind of just dilutes it a little bit, and it doesn't make it quite as special. Just like Drew expresses a complex relationship with Money in the Bank, I actually have a complex relationship with him being in the title picture. I wanted Bobby to be free of him. And I was getting tired of that feud, but I was so happy that he won that triple threat. I really didn't want anyone other than him to get it, unless Riddle won on Randy Orton's behalf, getting him in the match. But I didn't want to see McIntyre defeated by Riddle a second week in a row. I suppose ultimately I want him to stay near the top, even if he's more of a contender for now. The must-watch segment for this Raw Talk is definitely Jaxson Ryker. He was really good in this segment. His character is hopefully headed in a distinctive direction with the split from Elias. In this instance, he is showing us that it might be better to walk alone than walk with Elias. Besides, Drew will be back in a couple of weeks to possibly be in must-watch contention anyway, so why not recommend someone else? My rating for this week is 4 out of 5. Drew was reliably good. He mentioned he's there every couple of weeks, so he's pretty much a host now. And I agree, just like his in-ring work, he delivers consistently good Raw Talk segments. Jaxson got my attention as a possible force as a singles competitor, but Natalya and Tamina's segment was kind of just the same one that they've been doing since they became champions. It brought things down some. Kevin Patrick and R-Truth were good together as well, no shock there. Pretty good show overall. Where do you lie on Drew possibly becoming Mr. Money in the Bank? Where do you think Jaxson Ryker is headed with his character? How might Natalya and Tamina be used to greater effect as the women's tag team champions? Let me know what you all think down in the comments. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. That's how the channel grows and gets recommended to others, so it helps when you do. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.